Hi, everybody, and welcome. We are so excited to have you with us today for our MBA Admissions Essay Masterclass. We're going to wait for a couple of minutes for some of our other friends to drop into the session, but really glad to have you here with us. We're going to spend the next hour talking with my Fortuna colleagues about Haas, about UCLA, about Duke, about Yale SOM, and of course, you can always ask us questions about other schools as well. Really excited to be here for the third in a series of 4 webinars in which we are going to share with you a little bit about our insights, about the essays that are at the heart of the applications at the world's top business schools. So as you know, if you've been following us for the past few weeks, we've been joined by expert coaches at Fortuna who were previously in admissions at HBS, Stanford GSB, myself from Wharton, Chicago Booth, and other M7 schools, giving insights and advice for the essays all the way from Boston to Palo Alto. I'm excited to suggest to you that if you miss some of these sessions, to check out our recordings on the Fortuna YouTube channel, which is chock full of ideas and insights. So today we are going to be talking with the S7, Berkeley Haas, as I mentioned, Duke Fuqua, Yale SOM, and UCLA Anderson, as we look for just an incredible record-breaking year with this unprecedented level of competition that implies many candidates are opening up their target lists. And that's not surprising if you've been thinking about applying to business school during COVID and actually pre-COVID. But by opening up your list, you are probably thinking about improving your chances of securing a place at one of the top schools. So we hope that in the next 60 minutes, we'll be able to provide you with insights, ideas, and inspiration. So the 3 I's to put together a compelling personal story to secure your place in the MBA classroom of your dreams. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Judith Silverman Hodara, and at my last position before I founded Fortuna with my colleagues Matt Simmons and Caroline DeArte Edwards, I was a senior associate acting director at the Wharton School of Business, where I read, evaluated, and recruited applicants to the program for over a decade. And I have a fairly long history in the space of applicants, university admissions, and university administration. I am just really, really glad to be able to share with you some of my insights. I speak with so many thousands of MBA applicants every year about their own business school plans. And we do a lot of assessment, helping individuals assess their chances of admission success. A lot of you out there today that I've been fortunate to speak with, and I love seeing that. I love seeing these connections. And I hope that others of you who haven't spoken with us at Fortuna yet will take the opportunity to reach out for your own free consultation. So we'll give you a little bit more information about how to do that at the close of this hour. I wanted to introduce you to our panelists. Really glad to have them with us. I'm going to start with Sharon Joyce, who's a former Berkeley Haas Associate Director of Admissions. Welcome, Sharon.
Hey, Judith. Great to be here today.
Thanks so much for joining us. And next, I'm going to introduce Jessica Chung, former UCLA Associate Director of Admissions.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in today.
Terrific. Thanks again. Catherine Tuttle.
Hi. So happy to be here. Look forward to talking with you.
And last but not least, just by alphabetical, Zachary White, who's joining us. Zach, welcome to you.
Thanks, Judith. Happy to be here.
So glad to be with you guys and to see everybody in person. It feels like it's been a long time since we've all been able to be on a call together. So this is terrific for me. I wanted to just go back for one slide and to encourage you just a little bit more, to learn a little bit more about us. We've got over 35 former gatekeepers to the world's top business schools on our team, ranging all the way from Boston to Berkeley. You can see a list of our schools and the places where we have such a depth of expertise. I am daily blown away by the insights and collaboration and support of this fabulous team of colleagues that I get to work with. It's really something that I consider myself very fortunate to be able to do. We're going to talk again about the free consultation, but you can see if you log on to fortunaadmissions.com, you can find out where to sign up for one of those sessions with us in the coming weeks. We also do offer deep dive analysis, which is incredible to me, the amount of research that it took to get this going. So kudos to my Fortuna colleagues. Very, very in-depth numbers, qualitative, quantitative analysis of college and company theaters to HBS and GSB ever published. Stay tuned, there are more coming. So this is definitely a downloadable document that you're going to want to have by your side as you think about next steps for business school. So I'd like to sort of kick it off with Sharon. I'm going to turn the podium over to you and talk about Berkeley, Haas. One thing that I noticed, Sharon, that you and I were chatting about was that there are a lot of women these days at the helm of the school. You had mentioned to me that Carol Christ is now the chancellor, and also Ann Harrison is the dean of Haas. So that's something that you had brought to my attention, and I have the feeling it's probably pretty exciting for folks at the business school.
I think they're going to bring in a lot of tremendous energy. And I'm also really excited about the new president of the UC system, Dr. Michael Drake. Now, he did go to Stanford undergrad, but we won't hold that against him. But he is a physician. He's an ophthalmologist. So he went to the University of California, San Francisco for medical school, residency, and fellowship. And I think that he also, at the helm of the UC system, is going to bring about some really great initiatives around diversity and inclusivity. Carol Christ has been doing an amazing job, really shouldering the mantle of leadership through COVID. She sends out, anyone who logs on to Berkeley can start getting web updates about how she's handling the COVID crisis. And her leadership was really marked by transparency. She's quite impressive. And then, filtering down to the business school, Ann Harrison, when she came on board, she had big shoes to fill. I mean, Rich Lyons was a beloved dean, and he also was really instrumental in bringing around the 4 defining principles at Haas. And so she had fairly big shoes to fill, but all reports that I'm getting from my colleagues who are still at Haas is that she's doing a fantastic job. And her thoughts are really aligned with what President Drake is going to be bringing in terms of putting an emphasis on diversity, inclusivity, just really being sure that the business school is taking a holistic approach, just not in admissions, but also classroom instruction, research. And so I think that it's going to be a really exciting time for those who are joining Haas this fall, as well as in the future.
I am muted. Sorry about that. I love talking to you and to all of our colleagues about developments at their schools and what's going on. It's hard to keep up with all the schools and what's changing. There's been so much news, obviously, since the spring, moving into the summer. And so I really rely on the team as we collaborate and keep each other all up to date. So Sharon, I'm going to just sort of launch into a couple of things that we're going to be talking about. Not surprisingly, we're going to be talking about your goals for your eventual career, your fit with the school, and really who you are beyond your credentials. I feel like if I could wave a flag about that, and that part of your application, that part of your person really comes out in the conversation. So we're going to start with Haas, and Sharon, take it away.
Well, let me give, though, a little bit of context, though, too, and I'm sure that all of my fellow panelists will agree on this. Back in the day when we were all at our separate institutions, being an admissions committee reviewer is tough. There's so many really qualified applicants, but just to give some insight, when I was reading and working at Haas from about mid-October until early May, I would read at least 30 applications a day, usually 3 days a week. It's a lot of applications over the span of one cycle. And every day when I would kind of launch into my stack of 30 applications, I would know that maybe only 4 people in that stack were going to be passed on and invited to interview. And so just to echo what Judith was saying, it's about making this connection and really eliciting some sort of positive emotional response from the person who's reading you on the other side, and making sure that it's really full of authenticity. It really wants to, that you really spark someone's interest in wanting to get to know more about you, just kind of outside of what they're reading in your application. And so that, to that end, the first application essay that is required for Haas is asking you really about, what makes you feel most alive when doing it and why. And then the second question is getting at, sort of the redefinition of leadership, thinking about what's happened within the last 10 years, moving forward, what do you need to do to hone and really bring your leadership into focus, and subtly too, why is Haas the place for you to do that? And we'll jump into those a little bit more deeply on the next few slides. And then Haas does have a few optional essays. The first one is really getting at anything that's unique in your background. They want to know if you're a first-gen college student. They want to know if you had to work while you were in college. They want to know things about your family background that might have informed your experiences leading to the pathway that you're on currently to get into a top flight MBA program. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, because there's also this whole piece around allyship at Haas right now that I'll share a little bit more in a moment. And then finally, I think in some form or fashion, all of the schools have an optional question where they're really wanting to find out, is there, if there's any sort of red flags in your application, how can you address those? And I'll talk more on that in just a moment. But kind of jumping right into that question about what makes you feel most alive when doing it and why. This is the kind of quintessential question. Haas always has some sort of question that gets at what makes you tick. Outside of what they can glean from your academic transcript, from your GMAT or GRE scores, what is it that makes you unique? And so it's really a demonstration of something that you're passionate about. And I do want to kind of extend this piece of advice, is that it doesn't necessarily, your response doesn't necessarily have to be tied to your career goals. So just this past cycle, one of my clients who will be attending Haas in the fall wrote about being in a soccer league. At face, maybe that doesn't seem especially deep, but he was really able to convey the importance of being part of that league, because what matters most to him and why is developing authentic relationships with others. And this is, a group that initially was kind of a ragtag bunch of people who over 10 years have become exceptionally close friends and supports of each other. And so he wrote about that in a very eloquent way. And it obviously resonated with the admissions committee, because he is super excited to be attending in the fall. I had another client who wrote about her balcony garden and tending to that, and how just this action of planting something and growing something and caring for something, it did extend to her overall big picture, which is working on environmental sustainability. And so again, something that she was really passionate about, and she was able to really convey the why. Why is this activity of gardening, at face might not seem like something that has a lot of depth, but again, the way she wrote about it was really thoughtful and conveyed very well to the admissions committee. This is really a way to share your personality with the admissions committee. Like I said, in any given day, we can be reading anywhere from 20 to 30 to 40 applications. We really want to find a way to connect with the person on paper who is in front of us, and just see if they're a fit for Haas. I mean, Haas really is looking for people who think about things more deeply, who think about world change, who demonstrate a level of self-awareness. And I think that that's really important in the admissions essay process as well. And we'll go to the next slide. And then this question about the leadership strengths to date. I just wrote a piece for Poets and Quants, and so you can certainly access it after today. This question is very similar to last year. However, there's a bit of difference because they're not giving sort of a whole wind up in terms of how Berkeley values leadership. This one is posed in a way that's a little bit more ambiguous in terms of focusing on your leadership strengths to date. How could they be honed in terms of thinking about going to business school. I think that with this question, it's important to show what you've done with your leadership to date, reflectiveness, authenticity, and self-awareness of, gosh, had I only had, skill A or skill Y, I might have been more successful. And looking at Haas, these are some of the things I would turn to in order to strengthen my leadership moving forward. I think it's important to be vulnerable in this though too. I mean, obviously if you are a perfect human being and you have all of your leadership down pat, then why are you going to business school? I think that in a broader sense, going to business school is a great leadership laboratory for people to try on new things. And so I think that it's important in this essay not to give a laundry list of all of the courses and all of the clubs and all of the extracurriculars that you would take advantage of, but really be reflective about one or two things that mapped to you would really help solidify who you are and who you walk through the world as a leader in business and in industry. It's again really important to be authentic and reflective when talking about your strengths and your weaknesses that you want to develop while at Haas. And then the next slide. So again, this whole piece, though, the optional essay, the first one asks a lot about your demographic information. One thing I do want to say, though, because sometimes we'll have clients who will ask, well, geez, whether good, bad, indifferent, I feel like I came from a place of privilege. I didn't really have to grapple with financial struggles, physical limitations, things like that. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, don't feel like in looking at the question where they're asking about your background, about first-gen status, things like that, if that's not part of your background, that's fine. But I think that they do want to see that you understand what advantages maybe have been gained from being someone from a place of privilege. And they're really looking for bringing in students who understand and recognize the power of allyship and making sure that you will be someone who is welcoming of diverse perspectives in the classroom and beyond, because you'll be extending that, as you leave the MBA program and move forward, that you are someone who is welcoming of diverse perspectives. Not everything is from a white male Eurocentric mindset. And so I think that that's tremendously important to demonstrate to Haas. So I have had clients who use an optional piece within this essay to talk about some of the challenges they've overcome, or if they've not overcome challenges, how do they recognize, though, being an ally to those who have is really important, not just to them, but important in a broader picture. And then finally, there is a question that will ask, is there anything else you want the admissions committee to know about your background related to academics or choice of letter writers or things like that? And what I always say to my clients, if there's anything that would make us scratch our heads reading you like, gosh, I really don't understand this choice in recommender, or I wonder why they had such a bad semester during their sophomore year, use this opportunity to explain anything that could be considered a red flag. That's why I think it's really important when you're partnering with a coach, he or she is really good at helping you discern what could be some things in your applications that could be roadblocks to success, to admission. And so anytime you explain, to have ownership, and also to really demonstrate, though, why moving forward, you are prepared to do well academically in a top flight MBA program. And so that they have confidence, should they admit you, that you'll be able to persist and thrive in any particular program, not just Haas. This question, again, as I mentioned, tends to be asked at all of the top business schools if there's anything that needs to be explained. And so I do think that that really is important to kind of take a really close look at your profile and be aware if there's anything that might be a pitfall to your success at getting admitted, that you do take time to explain it in this particular prompt. And so with that, I'll turn that back over to Judith.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to mention a question about the red flags. When you're doing an optional essay, you don't have to give like 7 paragraphs on what happened sophomore year. You can be pretty succinct. I was overloaded with coursework. I was working a part-time job. I was sick. A family member.
Yes, and
I guess what's important is that telling what happened or why it happened is critical, but again, don't feel like you have to apologize for it. It's just something or some situation that transpired. Sharon, you were going to say something about that.
And to that end, particularly with that prompt, Haas does want it crafted more in bullet style versus a long essay. I mean, they just just the facts. And again, I would just echo with what Judith said. It's not, it doesn't need to be a big apology, just an explanation, and then how moving forward, you've recovered, you've showed resilience, and you're going to do great at Haas or any of the other top programs.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. And I'm excited to move forward to Catherine Tuttle, she's told me she's wearing Duke blue today. So thank you for doing that. Delighted to see you, Catherine. Always such a pleasure to have you with us. And if you would like to talk about my favorite essay question ever, 25 random things.
I know.
We really like to ask each other this question some nights at dinner when we run out of things to talk about. We're like, oh, tell me a weird fact. So welcome, Catherine, and happy to hear your insights.
Thank you so much. I absolutely love talking about Fuqua. I had a wonderful 5-year tenure there, and feel very strongly about the strength of the school and the incredible student body there. So Fuqua did make some updates this year, and not major ones. Thank goodness they kept the 25 random things. That is a fan favorite. Mainly they streamlined things, and from their standpoint, wanted to make it easier for applicants to get through the application. And so while that is a good thing, there are also some challenges associated with these changes, mainly that the length has been significantly cut. So there's one short answer now instead of two, and then with 25 random things, that used to be, the second essays both used to be 2 pages, 1.5 spacing, no less than 0.5 margins, but other than that, you can play around with formatting, and that we had a lot of leeway to kind of get a lot of information in. Now the first one is 750 words, and the second is 300. The massive cut is obviously the second one, and so we can talk through how to craft that this year, given the word count. So with that short answer, Fuqua has for a long time asked, what is your plan B? I think we've started to see a lot more schools ask that. I mean, that just given the world that we live in and how fast things can change. Also knowing that, we used to joke, at least half of the people that came in, if not more, changed their mind, about halfway through the program. So this is really just, have you thought about what do you bring to the skills that you have that you're bringing to the program, what you need from the MBA in terms of additional skills and experience, and then how you're going to apply this post MBA. They're not asking about longer term goals, so you really can focus on the short term. And I would spend more time on plan A and less time on plan B, but plan B needs to be clear and concise and make sense, right? So given your skills and experience, what could another option be, right? The point here is that they want to know that you have a solid foundation to work from, so that if you do decide to pivot, you have groundwork already laid to build upon. So don't overanalyze this, I would say. And typically, it's 500 characters. That's short. I get it. I know it freaks people out. I would start by writing it all out and then work with your coach to streamline it from what's nice to know to what we need to know, right? I actually really like the process of doing that, because as you work on other essays, you've got this clear, concise wording that you can start with and then build upon for other schools. So 25 random things. And while I think the coaches love this, I have a lot of clients that this just intimidates them, right? It can be scary, but it really is your opportunity to connect with the committee. This is where the committee members will fight for you. If they're on the fence, if you are, half the team is saying yes and half the team is saying no, they're really going to advocate based on this essay, right? And how it resonates with them. One thing that I see a lot of times, people feel like it has to be one sentence. So it's like 25 short things. It does not have to be that way. I mean, we have to be a little bit more careful this year with the 750 words. But you can have short, funny, bits. I remember, Judith, there was one that we worked on a few years ago where, my friends say that my handwriting looks like typewriter font. I mean, that stuff.
I totally remember that.
It's like, it can be funny, random things like that. It can also be, things that are more elaborate, things about telling me about a specific experience. I remember one client wrote about taking a solo trip in hiking, and he ended up meeting up with 3 other hikers. None of them spoke the same language. They used Google Translate, and they're still friends to this day, right? So that was 2 or 3 sentences. What we're trying to do here is not just repeat bullets from the resume or telling them things that they're already going to know from the online application and kind of demographics. We want to really connect and share things that are important to us. And you want to link those to the themes that you understand in terms of the Fuqua culture. So, collaboration and global exposure, diversity, community involvement, those types of things are great to pull from, and making sure you have a mix of things that are, high level and then deeper. One of my colleagues used to always say, don't tell me you've run 15 marathons, right? Lots of people run marathons. Tell me about why you started running. Tell me about your most memorable race. Tell me more than just these high level bullets. And so your coach really will be pushing you to create more of these memorable experiences. And the second one, again, this is where they have really cut. How are you going to add value in the Fuqua community? This essay has also gotten pretty popular. There's a lot of overlap with other schools now that where it didn't used to be. But this is really not about what you are going to get from the MBA. Yeah, and that's where it differs from a lot of schools. That, why do you need an MBA, and then why this school? Fuqua really isn't getting into that as much. It's what will you bring to our community? And I feel like that's where, when I'm initially working with clients, they oftentimes are focusing on the wrong things, right? I'm going to join the consulting club, and it's going to give me all this experience with case interviewing. We know that, right? What are you going to bring to the consulting club, right? And this is really where you can showcase the knowledge of the school that you have from, networking with the community. I have not had, the people that write this essay well are the people who have talked to current students, who have talked to alumni, who understand what the initiatives are within these clubs, and within these different experiential opportunities, and how they will build on that, right? I've had clients talk about, I understand that there is an initiative to expand the Women in Business Club to include more allies within the community. I'm going to jump on board and, do X, Y, Z to improve it and build on that. And ultimately, ideally, we want to tie it to your previous experience. So if you want to be an admissions ambassador, is that because of the incredible experiences that you had working, talking to people? Do you want to be a career fellow because you've had incredible mentors? But tie it to specific experiences. I know previously with the word count, we could mention a few things. I think this year, I would rather you pick one or two areas where you really feel like you can get involved and build those out versus listing a lot of areas that you can't cover much ground in. And finally, I think Sharon covered everything with this optional essay. Really is just anything that you need to address that might possibly be a concern. Exactly what she said, GPA, GMAT score, gap in employment, why you don't have your current supervisor as a recommender. Really should be short and sweet and not over-explaining things.
Catherine, thank you so much. Always terrific to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on to Jessica, who is coming to us from the West Coast to talk about UCLA Anderson. Really excited to hear your insights and to have you with us today. So thank you.
Well, I'm excited to be here today and discuss the new essay that Anderson just released a couple of months ago. I have to tell you, when I first read this question, I was excited, but also nervous at the same time because it's a big question and you only have 250 words to go in depth, which is very little. And it feels intimidating. It's a big question. There's very little space and you have to be articulate, but concise, and every word basically has to pack a punch. So you have to be very intentional on how you present your response to this question. So the question asks, how have events of the past year influenced the impact you'd like to make in your community, career, or both? Let me preface this by saying when I first started working at UCLA, this was back in 2007, we had 2 essays. Each of them, I think, were anywhere from 500 to 700 words each. And every year, I think since I've been there and since I've left, I feel like the essays are getting shorter and shorter. And in one sense, it's great because you don't have to write such a long response. But on the other hand, it gets a lot trickier because your words just have to be that much more meaningful. You have to be very picky and selective and strategic about what it is that you're presenting in your response. You can't just ramble. You have to be very focused, and everything really has to connect back to what the question is asking at hand. So I think it's interesting also that Anderson in the past always kind of focused their question on short and long-term goals. Like there was always a question about, what are your post-MBA plans, short and long-term, why Anderson, and something related to the community or the culture. And so this year, this essay really pivots away from those particular direct themes or direct questions. And this one is a lot more introspective. The admissions committee cares a lot more about just self-reflection, and it's just a really profound question. There's been so much that's been going on, or that has happened and is continuing to happen in 2020. Everyone's lives have been disrupted to a certain degree. And there's just been a lot of change and a lot to unpack, and there's no way that it hasn't impacted anybody in varying levels and degrees. And so the challenge is to really think about how, I guess, the different events of 2020 have impacted you, but not trying to be too surface level and superficial, and just kind of doing a skimming the surface type of essay where the admissions committee can't really understand how this impacted you on a more personal level. So I think one of the great things to do, I mean, really it's about depth better than breadth at the end of the day. So obviously there's just been a lot that's been going on, but if you're kind of, like I mentioned, just mentioning here and there a laundry list of whatever's been happening in the world, and you're not connecting it back to you and how it's impacted maybe the direction that you want to go in the future, then it's not going to resonate with the committee. I think, my colleagues were saying that these essays really have to create like an emotional connection with the reader. So if they come across too academic or too like lack substance, or just, aren't really emotive, they're not really going to make that connection. There's not going to be, aren't going to resonate with the committee at the end of the day. So in that sense, I think what to do is maybe think about 2 or 3 things, maybe start brainstorming some of the events that have happened over the course of the year, brainstorm and think about really connecting it back to ways that how it has impacted you, or how they have impacted you. And then of those, I would start to narrow it down, maybe focus on 2. I would probably focus on 1 and just really go deep. And within 250 words, you just don't have a lot to be able to kind of wax poetic about everything that's been happening and been going on and what you want to do. So like I said, every word has to really count and really add to what the question is asking. Someone once gave me this nice framework to think about when you're considering writing an answer to a question like this. Number 1 is to talk about the what, or think about the what. So what is it? Like thinking about the context, the background, what is that particular event or incident that's really sparked, and has been really poignant for you. And then think about not just the what, but then the why. Why has this been so meaningful? Why has this been left such a deep mark? To the point where it's actually spurring some kind of change in mindset, and it's change in actions, and a change of goals, whatever that might be. Or maybe it's not even necessarily a change. Maybe it's something that you've always been inspired or have been interested in, but now this is spurring more of a direct action. So think about the whys it's doing that. And then the next part was, I think, the how. So how are you going to move forward? And this is the part of the question where they ask, the impact you would like to make in your community or career, or both. So not just thinking at an abstract level of, like the pandemic, for example, has created this shortage in PPE, and I'm seeing like all these, I see all these gaps like within healthcare that need to be addressed. The greater inequality in healthcare delivery and management and systems and whatnot. And it's always this idea that's always, that I've been interested in. But if there's no real how of exactly why that's you're interested in that, and how you think about how you can aspire to make a change or be different or do something different, then it's just going to fall flat. So that's why I think maybe starting with several different ideas or topics before you delve deeper could help, because you might start to go in one direction and realize, well, this isn't really, as inspiring as I thought it might be, or maybe the why or the how isn't really getting fleshed out as well as I'd like it to be. So let me think about like these other 2 ideas or themes that I could perhaps move into instead. So I think that's really important maybe. And with this essay, I think you really have to iterate multiple times, because again, it is such a big question. And just to get it right within the space of that short, the 250 word limit, it's gonna take some time to refine that. So don't be afraid. I think number 1 when you start writing, or number 1, start with the bullet point outline. I think that'll be important, just because again, you wanna hit all the points you wanna hit and be strategic in your response. Number 2, as you're starting to write, to go ahead and don't worry too much about the word limit. Like, I mean, don't write 700 words, but don't try to keep it to the 250 initially in your first drafts. Go over, really think about what it is that you want to convey. And as you move forward with your iterations and your revisions, you can always start to cut down the extraneous words and phrases, and just refine your sentences to get it within that word space.
That's something that we talk a lot about, is that I feel like sometimes applicants are like, oh my gosh, I'm only going to put in what is going to fit in these words. Or here's the other part, I'm going to edit it, but I'm only going to edit it down to these words, and I'm going to like get rid of all extraneous content. And like the way I think of it is like everything goes into the sink, right? Like, and then only when you have like a body of work can you really start to pull out what's not going to make any sense. And I know it's very antithetical, and yes, we all know that pulling concepts and words out is really painful, but it is much easier to do that when you're looking at everything together than, and again, this is just, I think all of us have this opinion, rather than, oh, I gotta cut 25 words here now. It has to almost, is the word like marinate together before you start to pull out what you're going to keep. I'm sorry to jump in. This is just something I've been working on a lot lately with students, and I find it really impactful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much, Judith. I mean, especially because the essay is so short, I think it's been even more intimidating in that sense. But this is why I think it's important not to be constrained initially and be focused on that word limit, to really be able to feel that freedom to, like you said, put everything that you think could be meaningful or could be a part of the essay in those first few drafts. It's always, I think, a little bit easier to cut, as opposed to trying to cut while you're simultaneously writing the essay. Then that just makes it so much more difficult to get your messaging across. And it's just I would say this for any essay that you have a very short amount of space to express yourself, especially if it is a big question. So that would be something like that I do a lot with my clients, and sometimes it does, like you say, feel kind of counterintuitive, because if I tell them, don't worry about the word count for now, they wonder like, well, but it's 250 words or 300 words. How am I going to get it down from, X number? So I tell them, well, don't write 1,000 words. Like that is going to make it tough to edit, but, don't feel like you have to be at 250 or you have to be at 300 with the first few drafts. We can always, and I want to know, actually, it's good to know and see on paper, or see, to view what it is that you're writing and how it all flows, if it makes sense. Because something, maybe there was a phrasing or a sentence that might seem to you extraneous or maybe not that important, but then to, as you're kind of marinating on it and as you're going through different iterations, it might actually evolve to be a critical piece of your message. So that's why, I think that's important, or just to keep in mind as you're going through your iterations and revisions for these essays. In addition, with Anderson's essays, culture is such a big part of what the admissions committee is looking for as they're reviewing applications. I mean, probably for any school, but Anderson very specifically, when I was there, that was one of the things that we always, would go back to, would be our 3 pillars: sharing success, thinking fearlessly, driving change. We intentionally wanted to bring in a class every year, craft a class that's unique and diverse and interesting and driven and motivated, all those things. But they all have to have this commonality of helping one another, collaborating, not being afraid to think out of the box, and not just being someone who's just words and talk only, but someone who's actually going to walk the walk and do what they say they want to do. So those are some of the things that you want to try to convey within that singular essay that we have today. And like I said, just make each word count. The other part of this is balance it with a tone that will inspire and excite the reader. The other thing sometimes I find is that sometimes there's too formal of a tone in an essay, where it's really hard to really get a sense of your personality. And really, like, throughout the application itself, the one place where you can truly express your personality and is through the essays. And so it's, of course, you want to be professional, present all the facts, be accurate, be focused and driven, and present all those things. But you also want to balance it with a tone that's going to show some character. It's going to show something beyond just being one-dimensional. And this essay is a very aspirational essay. You know, the committee doesn't want to just know like what you want to do in the future. They want to know something beyond yourself. It's not just your own self-interest. Of course, you're going to business school to better yourself and to open up new windows and opportunities, but they also want to see what are you going to do beyond just your own personal self-interest. How are you going to impact change, drive change, and uplift your others through your community or through what you want to do professionally, or both. Maybe there's an interweaving between what you're passionate about outside of work and what you're also, what you want to pursue in the future. The last part, there's a couple things that aren't on this slide per se. Number one is that the question comes up of, well, how is the committee going to know what my future post-MBA goals are if I can't fit in this essay? Well, in this year's online data form, they actually do ask, these are new text boxes where they ask, how can you, or what are your short-term and long-term goals? It's about 600 characters. And then another question, a short answer question that asks, how can Anderson help you achieve your goals? So you have that space to address your short-term, long-term plans very, very briefly. So you'll want to be very focused and succinct to make sure you fit it within those parameters. And then the why Anderson, the way the question is framed is really around how they can help you to achieve your goals. So you can still present the research, the conversations you've had with current students and alumni in the community within that response. And again, it's very brief. I would steer away from just a laundry list, even though you have a short amount of space. Like Sharon said, maybe pick, and Catherine said, maybe pick like one or two or two or three and go a little bit more deeper versus just listing like 5 or 10 different clubs and events that go on campus. And I would think it back to connecting it back to the theme of, or the question of how they will help you to achieve your goals. And then also, but then at the same time, think about if your goals are not just beyond career, if there's maybe a personal goal, maybe like around developing greater leadership, maybe one of your why Andersons can also be about joining in activities that help you to foster greater leadership or stronger presentation skills or whatnot. So it all kind of connects back to that question. And then just finally, really quickly, there is a question, an optional essay that asks if there's any extenuating circumstances in your application or in your profile that the admissions committee should be aware about, 250 words. For that question, they explicitly state, please use your best judgment. So you want to make sure it's something that will add context to your application or to your profile that perhaps the admissions committee can't glean from other parts of the application itself. So reiterating something that's already presented elsewhere, or talking about something, if you're just trying to tack on additional wording and trying to use it as extra space for your essay question, the essay question, it's not going to impress the admissions committee. So really stick to, if there's really any extenuating circumstances you need to explain. Think about it. Something I always say also is you have to use it, or just be careful how you use it, because you don't want to over highlight something that maybe isn't a huge deal. And then all of a sudden the optional essay is focusing the reader's attention too deeply on something that maybe is somewhat more trivial. So this is something that requires some thought and strategy. When you're presenting your tone in the essay or in that optional essay, stick to the facts, be very direct. Don't make it an excuse. Don't be defensive, so you have to kind of balance that tone. You don't want the readers to draw the wrong conclusions from that. So just be mindful, as you're thinking about how and if you want to use that optional essay, how you want to present that in a way that's going to enhance your overall profile and the context of what you're presenting to the admissions committee.
Jessica, thank you so much. I love to hear from Anderson. I love to hear from you. I'm always interested because I have to tell you, when I started Fortuna, co-founded it. Anderson was not a school I knew a lot about. And so I'm really grateful to you for educating me, for having me know more about it. I love their questions, and I love their approach as well. And I've actually had some really favorite students that have ended up choosing to go to Anderson, which makes me very happy.
Awesome.
So, Mr. Zach White, welcome from the land of New Jersey, where the tomatoes are ripe and the corn is high. So August is a farming month, as for those of you that are from New Jersey. And Zach,
the Garden State, Judith, the Garden State. Yeah.
I'm so glad that Zach is with us. Zach is a newer member of our team, coming to us from Yale SOM with previous stints at the University of Chicago. We are so happy he's with us. His students have really loved his opportunity to work with them, to understand more about their own self-reflection. Zach is really good at like pulling out the story from the middle and having people really share what matters to them. And we're just really, really happy to have you with us today, Zach. So thank you. I wanted to just sort of ask you to talk us through a little bit about Yale SOM's short answer questions, and then we can go from there. And I do know, again, that we do have some questions from our terrific viewers today. We will get to them. We may go a little bit over today, so don't worry. We may extend our hour by a couple of minutes so that we can get some of these great questions answered. So Zach, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Judith. I'll be brief, but it should be easy because Catherine, Jessica,
wanted everybody to know we've got time.
They've all dropped a lot of good knowledge on us today. So and much of their advice applies to Yale SOM and of course other schools and applications as well. Yale, like a lot of schools, asks about short and long term career goals. Post MBA, these are actually two questions, but the wording's redundant, so I condensed them on the slide. But there are actually multiple choice answers. You're going to have to kind of select from a list of like 64 industries that you want to be in. But the meat of this is the little essay. And I thought one way kind of into this is to think about an elevator pitch. Think about your current elevator pitch, and maybe take 80% of that, lop off some of the older stuff, and imagine what you could add. You'll be energized by particular classes in an MBA program. You're going to land an internship, maybe help lead a club. Project just a little bit and think about what your elevator pitch, what you would like that to maybe sound like on graduation day. I think that's like a decent framework or a place to start with this. The challenge, of course, for a lot of applicants is, that schools like students who think big, who are visionary and ambitious, and especially, kind of Yale with its mission of encouraging students to address some of the biggest and most pressing problems in the world. So they want folks with a lot of potential, but at the same time, like an MBA is a relatively short program. It's fewer than 24 months. And frankly, the folks in career services expect first-year students to hit the ground running and find their lane pretty quickly and start positioning themselves for good internship opportunities. So the trick in these kinds of essays, I think, is to connect practical, concrete, achievable goals with an overall career vision that is imaginative and impactful. It's a little bit of a balancing act, but something, I think all of our coaches are pretty familiar with and can help with. The question does ask about, how you arrived at your interests, and even though it is about kind of ostensibly about your professional arc, the door is open to touch on, motivations, influences, inspiration, whatever excites you about a particular industry. And then Yale does ask that folks who are entrepreneurs or have ambitions to kind of start their own enterprise specifically note it in this section. So that's pretty much it for the short answers. And Yale only has one kind of required essay. And I think to understand how to tackle this, it's worth considering like the broader philosophy behind their whole application. You know, they've rolled out several new elements over the past 6 or 8 years to make the whole file more varied and also more objective and more powerful in terms of its predictive capacity, right?
Can I ask you a question, Zach, about, I love the word commitment. I mean, that's like a really deliberate word choice. You know, it's not like your greatest success. It's not about your greatest, it's like, it's really asking the student, and we talked about your ability to get that heart out. You know, that to me, can you talk a little bit about that word?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think that the key word is the first word, right? Describe. And you know, the essay was inspired by Amy Wisniewski, who's like an amazing professor at SOM in organizational behavior, and she said about this about kind of essays in general, quote, and I'm quoting from the next slide here, reading about future plans is helpful, but actions speak louder than words. And, you know, Yale's always said they're interested in students with a bias towards action. And they want to see how people's kind of beliefs take shape in the world. So in many ways, it's a behavioral question, right? The key to the essay is in the first word, describe. They're looking for something actually that's a little bit more objective and dispassionate. And I think that sets up a dilemma to your question, because as you've heard from, you know, the experts here today and maybe in the other Masterclass series, right? Emotions and motivations and beliefs, those are all compelling narrative hooks for your audience. So kind of finding the right commitment, right? You've got to find a thing that's really important to you. And, you know, that's one way to really ensure that your essay has an emotional core. Yale's clear, this can be personal, this can be professional, but it needs to be something that you hold pretty dear. But they're trying to keep you honest, right? By asking about commitment, but also asking you kind of to describe this dispassionately. You know, if something's really meaningful to you, you'll be committed to it. And if you're deeply committed to something, you should be able to show what that commitment looks like. And then there are bound to be, you know, kind of strong feelings and core values and emotions and motivations that are backing those actions. But Yale wants to infer those from the essay. So my next kind of tip was, you know, remember that the why is important, but the how matters more for Yale. And this might be kind of a point of departure from some of the advice or some of the approaches that other schools take with these essays. You know, I think maybe approaching this with like an inductive mindset could be helpful. Typically, applicants are a little more deductive. They start with the thesis or something big they want to say about themselves or show to the committee, and then they kind of scour their background and kind of find evidence and build their case around it. And that's a great approach, completely valid oftentimes. But I think with this prompt, Yale's actually nudging applicants to start with the specifics, to start with the concrete, and then to tease out the patterns. And again, this is where I think a coach can be really, really helpful. And it's consistent with what I was saying earlier about, you know, Yale's efforts, I think, to make their application more predictive. And you know, Bruce Delmonico, the dean there, has described it as three-dimensional. You know, they were among the first schools to use behaviorally anchored rating scales for recommendations. They've added live video questions several years ago, and now every applicant completes a behavioral assessment module as well. So the applications, you know, kind of, because it's so varied and there are different modes, it demands a certain level of authenticity, right? It's kind of set up to foil people who try too hard to be something they're not. you can polish your essays for weeks and months, and you should do that. Don't get me wrong, but right after you submit it, know that you're going to have to answer some live interview questions where you're going to be thinking on your feet and using your actual voice in real time. And the admissions committee is going to kind of be seeing these things right next to each other. So you want to make sure that they'll line up. You don't know what kind of interpersonal skills the behavioral assessment might surface for the committee, or exactly how your recommenders write about you, but you want them to line up with what you say about yourself in the essay. So in many ways, the best strategy is to really just be yourself, to take a hard look at where you've invested your time, where you've invested your money, the choices you've made, and what you can really show to them. It's almost like watching a silent movie, right? If you couldn't speak, or you could just show somebody your bank statements, they might be able to look and say, oh, shopping at REI, gym membership for 3 years running, entry fees for marathons. I don't see any, trips to McDonald's here, right? You can then kind of induce from those clues a pattern of behavior, and they've really shown a commitment to those, to health and fitness, perhaps.
When you say, Zach, don't focus on the SOM mission, you mean like don't tailor your essay to echo back on what is written? I mean, it's really not written over the gates, but what would be written over the gates in New Haven? Is that kind of what that comment is for?
Luke's at Veritas last time I checked, right? Light and truth. No, I'll admit the last tip has a little bit of a clickbait quality to it. But I do think it's curious, right? Given Yale's distinctive mission, educating leaders for business and society, I think a lot of people wonder why Yale doesn't ask a fit question. Why SOM? And I think applicants might be then tempted in their essays to, kind of bend their narrative toward that mission, or pick a particular commitment because they think it speaks to the school's values. And for many applicants, things might kind of line up that way organically, right? There's a selection bias here, or a selection effect. But I just wouldn't want people to force it, right? Really focus on you and kind of what you've done and the actions you've taken. That bias towards action. Actions speak louder than words. Start with the concrete and kind of build from there. Stick close to the question and close to who you are.
Thank you so much. I am going to skip the optional essay, Zach. I hope that's okay.
No. All the wisdom that folks have shared applies here. So just rewind and listen to Jessica.
Great. So we are going to move into some questions. I have some terrific questions, and panelists, if you don't mind, we're going to do a little bit of a speed round. So we'll just kind of, jump in if you have an answer. We're looking again at the round line deadlines coming up, round 1. And also, please remember to sign up for your free consultation with Fortuna. We would love to see you. So here's a couple of questions. Wanted to ask about, I'll start with you, Catherine, how students have been able to offset low GPAs, which like under a 3.0, or a low GMAT under 700. Can you maybe give some action items for someone who falls into that category?
Yeah, of course. So a couple ideas. Obviously if you have the lower GPA from undergrad, we do ideally offset that some with the GMAT or GRE, but obviously that doesn't always happen. So some options to think about, signing up for an accounting course or a stats course through Coursera. I believe you can pay a little extra and actually get a grade. So, you can put that on your resume. You can add that to the online application. and show that you can do well in some of the quantitative coursework. That tends to be where the issue is. And then also just being very clear in the resume and through, what you have in your recommendation letters, and just every aspect of your application, showing those analytical quantitative skills in your profile. I mean, ultimately, a lower GPA, everybody makes a mistake. When you're 18 and you go to school, everybody has a bad semester. If they're used to that, it's really how you've done at work since.
Jessica, thank you so much, Catherine. Jessica wanted to ask you, is applying after 30 a red flag? Does it need to be explained?
Great question. I would say, I think for most business school admissions teams, I would say age is not really a huge data point, or a make it or break it data point. It's really about what you've accomplished at this stage in your career and in your life, and why a business school is the next natural step for you. And for everybody, that's different. It can happen at different times in their lives. And so I would say to own it and not feel like you have to use it as to feel defensive, or you have to need to explain. And I think some people feel like they might need to, because when you look at class profiles, typically the average age of an incoming student is hovers around maybe 26 to 28 years old. So if you're beyond that, or significantly beyond that, it might feel like, well, I'm aged out and this isn't really the best time for me to pursue business school. I've already kind of passed that stage of my life, but that's not true. You definitely, though, I think, have to present a strong case at the end of the day. You want to be competitive with the profile and the pool of applicants that are applying to the schools you're looking at. And really, it's about your career progression, your leadership, increase in responsibilities, maturity, diverse perspectives, management potential, leadership potential, cultural fit. All those things are really what the schools are going to look at. And age is really not going to be that data point that's going to, be a huge focus. It's really about presenting yourself in a very holistic, balanced way, where you're really going to add value, enhance the fabric of the community and the learning environment. And that's, that's ultimately what's going to help to make you stand out as an excellent candidate.
Thank you so much. I'm going to toss the ball to Sharon. And Sharon, I don't know if you still have video capabilities, but if you do, welcome back. Would love to ask you, how do schools look at career goals that are significantly different from current work experience? Say someone from tech switching to social impact if they've had a lot of community experience. If someone has great stories to tell, do you think it's possible to make that happen, to make that switch happen?
I do. I think it can be tricky though, right? Because at the end of the day, admissions committees also have strong relationships with their colleagues in the Career Center. And it's important that they're selecting a class of students who will also have good career outcomes. I mean, I think sometimes rankings are attached to that. And so I do think that it's important to have something that is digestible and makes sense to an admissions committee. Having said that, you don't want to come completely out of left field, though. I would suspect that most people who want to do a pretty significant career pivot, you would have to have some nuggets of decision. Maybe there's things that you're doing, in terms of community involvement, or you're sitting on a board, or you've had some previous experience, or you've been able to build something out of your current career trajectory that really does show evidence that.
Thank you so much.
And what you're getting to. And I think sometimes it's
Sharon, you're breaking up.
Who is self-directed and motivated. Sometimes I have clients who I've worked with who are looking at career trajectories that might not. Oops, sorry. Just my final thought is just making sure that you can also prove to an admission that you can also be in an
Thank you so much.
your career.
I know that
Okay.
Sharon might be, her audio may be a little glitchy. I'm going to ask Sharon to maybe write on a response to that question. I'm going to send it to all of the participants so you can see it. Question about career goals. Thank you, Sharon. We're so glad that you were able to be with us. And Zach, the last question of the day goes to you. Is there a negative connotation to using a recommender who is not your current supervisor? If you're assuming that you would use the optional essay to explain that asking your supervisor can create that awkward position with your employer. We're all familiar with that one.
No.
So there's not a negative connotation.
No, I think they pretty much hit it on the head, right? All of these applications are say, often say specifically in the optional essay, let us know why you're not using a current supervisor. So that's exactly what it's there for. It's common to see and completely understandable and explainable, and I think pretty straightforward. So you do, of course, want to find someone who can speak with real authority and intimacy about your professional achievements and aptitude and potential and strengths and weaknesses. And often that is a supervisor because they've already kind of had maybe a framework in mind to evaluate you and think about these things. But it does not need to be a direct supervisor, and using that optional essay to explain it makes perfect sense.
Great. Well, thank you again so much. Yes, Catherine, jump on in.
Sorry to interrupt, but I know with Sharon breaking up and the question asked about a specific example, but I think the key with that career change question is the synergy and telling that story. And as a specific example, and I'm sure you remember this client, but we had someone last year who worked at a startup in the education industry in China. She had a very strong passion for wine and had started a wine tasting event with her friends and had learned about there. And so her goal post MBA was to go back to China and work in the wine industry. So again, very different from what she was doing before, but we told that story and leveraged her language skills and her interests, as you have mentioned, wanting to switch into social impact. So yes, it's totally doable. It's just getting that story down clearly and concisely and hitting all the themes.
Thank you. I get so excited. I actually was just in touch with her this morning, so it warmed my heart. Loved her.
I love her.
So I really just wanted to thank our panelists for being with us today. Zach White from Yale SOM, Jessica Chung from UCLA Anderson, Catherine Tuttle from Duke Fuqua, and Sharon Joyce, who is with us from Haas. We are really glad to have some time with you today. I know we ran a little over. We had some great questions. You can check out our other Fortuna webinars at youtube.com/Fortuna admissions. We have terrific interviews with gatekeepers from the other top schools. Again, also thank you to Karen Hamu, who is behind the scenes making all of this happen and keeping all of us honest. We look forward to seeing you guys soon. I'm Judith Hodara. Glad you were with us. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.